We are Ole Miss Rebels. As Mississippi's flagship university, we dig deeper, see farther, work harder. We pioneered human organ transplants. We helped prove Einstein's theory of gravitational waves. We are conducting life-changing research that solves the problems of today. We are Ole Miss, transforming lives and the world.
Welcome to the POMcast with Stephen Willis. Now we're going to do things a little different. We are going to provide an honest look at Ole Miss athletics for the fan, by the fan, and of the fan. That is what we do. Hell be to me. I'm just kidding. Tune in for some Ole Miss sports news. We're going to give it to you straight. Yeah, right now. The POMcast starts now. It happens now. Holy cow. Listen to me. It's starting. Well, it's going to start right about now. Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is a beautiful day here at the Palatial Central Florida Studios, and Ole Miss won a national title yesterday. It doesn't matter that it was in women's golf. We should enjoy it. We should celebrate it. It was a win in one of the 15 sports. The 15 sports that matter, it was the win. People are going to try and hate on you. People are going to try and hate on it. Don't listen to them. Enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with celebrating the fact that your school won a national title, no matter what that sport is in. So I'm very excited. It's probably the first. It is the first female national title in school history, and it's the first uncontested national title in team sports in school history. There's 4 total. There's 3 in football from 59, 60, and 62. They're all contested, and they're nothing unanimous. This is a unanimous title. This is very good, and congratulations to the ladies for making it happen. Right now, might want to get in. I want to tell you about the Vault Society. That is the big push from the Ole Miss Athletics Foundation. It's a 5-year commitment of support, and membership starts at $5,000 a year. And there's a benefit chart on the site. We'll get to that in just a second. All gifts to Ole Miss between now and June 30th will receive triple points. Red points are non-deductible and go towards priority seating. Blue points are 90% tax deductible and go towards parking and non-home ticketed games. Postseason, bowl games, neutral site. There's a series going on in Hoover right now that would fit that bill, and there's a Labor Day football game that would also fit that bill. If you have any questions, go to the website at give2athletics.com. Again, that website is give2athletics.com. Enjoy the show on Twitter at The Stephen Willis and at The Rebel Walk. Catch us on Facebook at facebook.com/POMcast or at The Rebel Walk. On YouTube, you can catch us at Positively Ole Miss. Hit the bell, subscribe, please. You not only know when we're streaming, but what we're streaming if you do that. And we're on Twitch at Positively Ole Miss, all one word. We also have the Willis Digital Media accounts on YouTube and on Twitch, so you can catch us there as well. That's for stuff that goes beyond Ole Miss as well. We have a bunch of interviews, and I'm going to have to cut this a little bit short. We've got an interview with David Waters from Gator Breakdown coming up at 11:30, so I'll need to prepare a little bit for that. We have Jake Crain on the show today talking SEC football. He's going to go over. It's about a 16-minute interview. We have a video down there if you just want to watch it, but we're going to put it in here for other audience members to enjoy it as well. But right now, I'm going to continue talking about the national championship. Oh, real quick, if podcasts are your thing, we're on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and Pandora. So that's the way you can listen. We're also on numerous smaller podcatchers that you can catch as well. So I'm Stephen Willis coming to you live from the Palatial Central Florida Studios. A beautiful day down here. Want to talk... Ole Miss won a national championship yesterday. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't matter what it's in. Ole Miss won a team national championship yesterday, and that should be celebrated. I think the team comes back at 1:45 Central at the Oxford University Airport if you're in the area and want to stop by and lend your support. But one of the 15 sports, Ole Miss won a national championship yesterday. I'm going to keep saying that over and over because it hasn't happened in my lifetime. I mean, the last time we played for it, I think, was men's tennis in 1995. But this actually happened. First title for a women's program. First undisputed national title in school history. We have 3 contested national titles in football back in the late 50s, early 60s. But this is a big day. This is good. This is one of those things that really gets the snowball rolling. Before you can continue to win them, you have to win your first. And Ole Miss got that first one out of the way. So congratulations to the women's golf team for all that you did. And you should be immortalized. I think Oxford University Golf Course, there should be a statue or something up on that ground. Because of the impact of what they did. I mean, honestly, we're talking over 100 years of athletics, and this is the first uncontested title. That needs to be recognized in a very severe way. There needs to be a statue, there needs to be a plaque, there needs to be a banner. Whatever you want to do, recognize those girls for doing something that we have literally waited our entire life for. So, just keeping it real there. Also, in the SEC tournament in Hoover, Ole Miss dropped a game at Vanderbilt. If you look down there, it won't be on this show. You can catch a reaction video from last night, the 5-4 loss to Vanderbilt with Chris Muller. Also, a preview of today's game against Georgia. I can't remember his name, but the guy who pitched against Ole Miss on Friday in Athens, he only gave it 1 run and 3 hits. He's pitching in this game as well. So if you want all the information, it's available on the site. Like I said, we have a Gators breakdown coming down at 11:30. We're going to take a break a little early. And we're going to play Jake Crain when we come back, and I will prepare for that. But other than that, I'm going to give you probably 5 or 10 minutes back today. So thank you very much. I just wanted to come on here and say that yesterday Ole Miss won a national title. It's absolutely almost obscene. But we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Jake Crain is going to take over, and we're going to talk a little SEC football. And you can catch it there. And then I think tomorrow morning is going to either be a Gators preview or a South Carolina preview. And this afternoon, we're going to have the reaction same day to the game because it should start at like 3 Eastern, 2 Central, or something like that. 2 Eastern, 1 Central. Sometime around. Time zones mess me up, really. When I live in the Eastern time zone and I need to cover Central, the times going back and forth mess me up. So if I'm wrong, I apologize about that. But we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Jake Crain from the J-Boy Show is going to tell you all that you need to know.
Only 10% of us get enough daily exercise.
And that number is dropping.
Nearly 30% of us are overweight or obese.
We spend 6 hours a day in front of a screen.
As a result, we now have a shorter life expectancy than our parents.
But give us the right start in sports, and we'll never stop.
Learn how at active4life.ca.
Hey, this is Stephen Willis from Positively Ole Miss. We're almost done with this break. We'll be back with good information quite soon.
The military has been in every generation of my family, and so has VA. It wasn't easy for my dad after Vietnam, but VA helped him and my mom get the home they'd always wanted. My grandpa's been coming to VA since World War II. They even helped him lay to rest one of his battle buddies from Normandy. And me, I followed in their footsteps and served with pride. And now that I'm out of the military, the GI Bill's helping me with school. Every generation of my family has served, and VA has served us all.
All right, welcome back to a special edition of Around the SEC. I'm here with Jake Crain. We're going to talk a little SEC football today, coming up on the season. Who says May's too early to talk SEC football? Nobody. That's who. Jake, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on. Excited to talk a little ball and look forward to what hopefully is a really exciting season this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just jump right in. I have questions about Alabama. Not that they're going to win the West, but replacing a quarterback, a running back, 2 wide receivers, including the Heisman Trophy winner, a mess around on the offensive line, and bringing in an offensive coordinator that traded away DeAndre Hopkins. I have concerns, man.
You know, I mean, and listen, you know, logically those are valid points. I just look at what Nick Saban's built there, the early enrollees they brought on this offensive line class. It's as good as it gets. Now, it may take them a little bit to get their feet wet on offense. I think defensively they're going to be a whole heck of a lot better than they were last year. People don't realize going into last year, they lost like 85% of their pass rush. They got guys like Will Anderson back. You look across that defensive line. Offensively, you know, with Bill O'Brien and Bryce Young, I think that's a very interesting fit. I wonder how much they're going to use Bryce Young's legs. I think they lose an SEC game this year, but I think they do win the West. And Alabama, I mean, the reason Nick Saban has so much success outside of being an unbelievable recruiter is he's an unbelievable structurer of the roster. They never tend to lose too much at too many important spots, and they always have great players. They develop talent. You don't see a ton of guys leaving there. So while they won't be nearly as dynamic as they were last year, they're unbelievably talented, and they're adding in the portal. I mean, Henry To'oTo'o from Tennessee is huge for that defense. Jack Martin's the best punter in the country. So Alabama, they're going to be right there.
Yeah, and I do have concerns about Bryce Young, not because of talent, because he's a little slight guy. And last year, in years past, Tua played the whole fourth quarter and part of the third quarter. Mac Jones played the whole fourth quarter and part of the third quarter. You hardly saw Bryce Young last year. He's going to be fine. He's going to be talented, but there's probably going to be some growing pains.
Oh, yeah, there is. I mean, especially when a young guy is actually the guy. And there were people last year that actually thought Bryce Young was going to give Mac Jones a run for his money. And people have to remember, Mac Jones was a heck of a player. He's also surrounded by some really good players. Had probably the best offensive line, if not one of the best, if not the best offensive lines. You look at that receiving corps, even losing Jalen Waddle with what he had, they always had an answer. And they're returning some guys I really like Latu at the tight end. But you bring up a great point. You know, I think that they have to balance how much Bryce Young runs. This guy isn't built like Cam Newton. You know, he's not built like Joe Burrow. He's not one of these bigger guys. He's really witchy, as I call it. He can get himself out of trouble, extend the play. The question is, if you're Bill O'Brien, how much is Bryce Young going to understand, listen, there's no problem with tucking it and getting 3 and not trying to put your head down or extend the run to make it 2nd and 5 instead of 2nd and 7 because you can't run him to death. He won't make it through the whole season. Then you go back to, all right, well, will there be any zone read stuff? Are they going to let Bryce really be himself or tone it down? Because I don't know if he's a guy, especially early, that is going to sit in the pocket and tear you apart.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me a little bit, actually I'm going to date myself a little bit, of Dexter McCluster at Ole Miss. He was elite at positioning his body not to take a direct hit. That's the reason he was so durable, even though he was 5'8", 170 pounds, playing running back in the SEC. There's a little bit of Bryce Young, and he has to come to grips in terms with that to run the ball in this league.
Now I think he's a great athlete. I don't think he's as athletic as Nick Marshall, but it's kind of that line that Auburn had to walk with Nick Marshall, who's a guy who ran the ball a lot, but was able to avoid contact. He knew when to get out, knew when to say when. That's why he was able to make it through the whole year, and that's a recipe I think you'll see Alabama use. And my question is, you know, with the backups behind him, if something were to happen to Bryce Young, you know, Paul Tyson's a totally different quarterback than Bryce Young is. So how does that affect your offense? How does that affect your play calling? It's going to be interesting to see how Bill O'Brien handles that.
And I'm a huge Brian Robinson fan. I'm looking forward to seeing him as the guy. And there's a chance for them to be dynamic, but Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss come into Tuscaloosa week 4. There's a chance to get them.
Well, Lane's so good offensively, and he's one of the guys that Nick Saban will tell you he's a problem because he's been at places with Nick Saban. He knows what those defensive guys are looking for. He knows the adjustments. He's got really good feel as a play caller in him. And listen, Lane gets a lot of credit, but I like Jeff Levy as well a lot too, the OC there. Those two have great rapport. I think that between Matt Corral, Lane Kiffin, and Jeff Levy, that's the best relationship and chemistry there is between a quarterback, a head coach, and offensive coordinator. But the question is, can they stop anybody? I know they've added some personnel on defense. They didn't have anything last year. But one of the most glaring stats of last year is that if Ole Miss didn't even put a defense out there against Alabama, they'd only given up 20 more yards. So you got to be able to stop them because we know Lane's going to score. And if they're able to, it can be a heck of a game. Hugh Freeze did it with Bo Wallace.
Yeah, and last year defensively was kind of an aberration because you had no spring, a shortened fall, and all the COVID stuff coming in, and Alabama coming in week 3, Florida week 1. There was going to be a problem at the beginning of last season. They bounced out of it pretty well with the top 10 win in the Outback Bowl. But let's move on to Florida, speaking of which. Emory Jones, I think the biggest trap that Dan Mullen has to deal with is the success of Kyle Trask. Emory Jones is not that type of quarterback. If he tries to force the Kyle Trask system on him, it could go wrong.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Emory Jones is really more of the type quarterback that Dan Mullen's used to. If you kind of go back through that he's used to operating with. You talk about losing a lot at Alabama. Look at what Florida lost offensively. I mean, you lose Pitts. You lose Kadarius Toney. You lose Grimes. You lose Kyle Trask. They're having to replace some guys offensive line. I don't think Emory Jones can throw them to wins. I got Florida actually taking a step back. I think Dan Mullen is on his way out of college football into the NFL. He's just looking for the first time to hit that eject button and get out of the plane.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way as well. Let's move off the road to Athens. And one thing that I hit Corey Burton, who's on your network from time to time, he comes on the show, is will Kirby Smart take his thumb off the offense enough for them to be successful? Will he be okay giving up 24 points instead of 14?
Yeah, I think they get over the hump this year. I got Daniels and Todd Monken. And if you look, it's kind of funny. Kirby Smart worked for Nick Saban for a while. He has that blueprint. There was that old mindset of thinking we're going to run the ball, play action pass, play great defense, win the field position battle, not turn the ball over, and we're just going to be better than you. And for a while in college football, you go back to the LSU, the 9-6 games, and when Bama was beating people 24-3 and 20-0. And not giving up any points. That's not the way the game is nowadays. And Nick Saban evolved from that. Speaking of Lane Kiffin, decided, hey, we got to score points to win. And he started to trust the OC and the quarterback a little bit more as it went down the road. And I think you're seeing Kirby Smart this year with Todd Monken and JT Daniels. I know they lost Pickens, but they've recruited really well. You look at Blaylock, you look at Burton, you go down the list of the athletes. Darnell Washington is an absolute monster at tight end at 6'7", 280, what is it? And he's built like a Greek god. But physically, that Georgia team is different as well. But no, I think they're going to open it up. I think you're going to see Georgia take shots early, which keeps the defense honest. No more will it be, hey, we're going to load the box against Georgia, try and stop the run and let them throw to beat us. Now you have to defend every blade of grass. And when you have those type athletes, you're going to score a lot of points. And that's the difference right now between Georgia getting over that hump. Because don't forget, Georgia's led at halftime against Alabama, I believe, the last 3 games and hadn't been able to finish it. What does that mean? They're losing the battle of adjustments. When you're more balanced on offense, it's harder to make those adjustments, therefore letting you score more points throughout the course of the game as opposed to when you're on script early.
All right. Let's go across to the SEC West a little bit. Texas A&M, Kellen Mond gone. They are improved talent-wise all over the field, but it's down to a new quarterback. What are you hearing over there?
Well, it's been between, freshman phenom Haynes King or the young guy, I believe he may be a sophomore now, and Calzada, who's actually from the Atlanta area here in Georgia. And they're 2 different quarterbacks. And I'll say this, I thought Kellen Mond was a great college quarterback. But I don't think Jimbo trusted him late in games to throw the ball, and they didn't have to with that offensive line. If you watch, you go back, there were times where they said, listen, we're just going to be a python and squeeze you to death in the fourth quarter, and they were good enough up front to do it. I actually think you bring in a guy like Haynes King, if he's the starter, you open that offense up a little bit more. They could be even more dangerous offensively. They return Spiller. Damian Craig's one of the best wide receiver coaches in the league. What he was able to do with that group last year with the opt-outs and the injuries to still be able to put up the numbers they did was impressive. But I think Jimbo, the offense may be better. Now, Calzada's more of a pro-style guy. He's more experienced. Kind of fits more of who Jimbo is. But Jimbo's been smart enough to be able to adjust. But the biggest difference for Texas A&M is defensively. Typically, Texas A&M hasn't had a problem scoring on offense. You go back to the Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans, go down the list, Kyle Allen, all that stuff. They've had trouble stopping people. Last year, they lead the SEC in defense. They finished with a top 5 recruiting class. They are hell up front on the defensive line. I love Edgerrin Cooper at linebacker. You look at Jalen Jones out at corner, the guys they're returning. I love A&M. Do they have enough right now to usurp Alabama? I don't think so, but Jimbo is really starting to build something in College Station. And if people don't watch out, Texas A&M is going to start rolling even more than just once every 2 or 3 years because Jimbo's built it from the inside out. That's the only way you can compete against teams like Alabama and Georgia in this league.
All right. And full disclosure coming up, I served on staff with Ed Orgeron at Ole Miss. I was at Rivals for 10 years. So there's a little bit of history going on with what I'm about to say. I saw a top coaching list that you put out on Twitter today.
Oh yeah. Brace for impact.
Yes. And how is Coach O different than Larry Coker?
You know, here's the way I look at it. And listen, winning a national championship is obviously the epitome, and that has to be taken into account. But where would I tell the people that complain, where would you put Gene Chizik on that list, who won a national championship, went undefeated, then got fired 2 years later? And you've seen that happen multiple times. You bring up Larry Coker, and I think Ed Orgeron's a good coach. I think he is. But I think if you put Lane Kiffin at LSU, they're a real problem consistently. Because, again, you can run into personnel that helps you. You could have had this Sprite bottle right here, Coach Cam Newton at Auburn, offensively, and they'd score 40 points a game. That's how good he was. Now, I think Ed Orgeron is an unbelievable coach and a great motivator. And the craziest part, I've got LSU finishing second in the West this year, tied record-wise for Texas A&M and beating them the last game at home. But I don't think Ed Orgeron is in the category of a Kirby Smart, of a Nick Saban, of a Jimbo Fisher, and being at LSU, you can win with the resources and the talent. You're the state school. You're going to dominate that state. And then you hit the lottery with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and some of these other guys. I want to see if he can sustain it. 2-3 years down the road, if they're having sustained success, I'll be the first one to come on here and say I was wrong. But I don't see it.
All right. Let's go up to Starkville, the drop 8 kryptonite for Mike Leach. He find a cure this year?
I think they're a person. I've had Mike Leach on the show. I like Mike. And what he did at Washington State and Texas Tech was awesome. But that's in the Big 12 and the Pac-12. This is the SEC. You look at the LSU game last year, they torched LSU because LSU wouldn't get out of man. It's amazing the teams that started playing zone against them, how much more success they had. And it's one thing to do it in the Pac-12. But if you cannot run the ball in the SEC, you're not going to smoke draw your way to the SEC championship. You're just not going to do it. And the air raid his system, it's really, really hit or miss. But I think the athletes in this league being paired up with where you're at in Starkville, with what Lane's doing at Ole Miss, I just see it as an uphill battle, and I don't think Mississippi State's going to be a factor.
All right, let's head up to Oxford, Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin in year 2. We talked about Matt Corral a little bit. We talked about Jeff Lebby a little bit. And how do you see it going this year in Oxford?
You know, they're building. They're building. I think they're going to beat one, maybe 2 teams they're not supposed to beat. I really like their person. I know they lost Elijah Moore, but I like Aboa. I love Braylon Sanders. I love that connection that they have, even in the spring. But Matt Corral, when I drop my top quarterbacks, he's going to be up there very, very high. I think he's got unbelievable feel, not only in the pocket, but outside the pocket. I already talked about the rapport with Lane and Jeff Lebby. I know the one kind of caveat is the offensive line. With the coach being let go, it's kind of a weird time. They've got to shore that up. That's the engine that makes the whole thing go. But I believe in Lane. So I see a good year. I see him finishing anywhere between 3 and 4 in the West and beating somebody they shouldn't and building. I think even when they do lose Corral, Lane Kiffin is so good with quarterbacks, him and Lebby, and they get that defense built up. Ole Miss is going to be a formidable problem. No longer is it going to be a cakewalk when you play Ole Miss.
Okay, and just some of these lists that come out, especially after the draft, there's some of them that just omitted Matt Corral completely. They do a top 10 list without Matt Corral. What do you think's happening there?
I think a lot of people don't do their research. I think a lot of people look at other lists, and it tends to be contagious. But if you don't have Matt Corral in your top 10 quarterbacks in college, even what are we talking about? If we're talking about production, he has to be on there. You know how much they're going to throw the ball. You know how good Lane is and Jeff are schematically. The way they use the back out of the backfield, something that Lane does really well. You look at Jerry and Ely. A guy that I think is going to have a super year. He's going to get a lot of touches in the passing game, not a ton compared to other guys in the run game. But listen, these preseason lists, a lot of them are hot takes trying to generate content in the offseason. But I think if you omit him, I'm seeing some lists where JT Daniels isn't in there. So I don't understand it. And again, I think there is some bias against the SEC when it comes down to it from some outside forces. But listen, preseason lists are preseason lists, and we're going to see.